Hi, welcome to Open Insurance TV podcast, a program produced by Revista Policy and GRTV. I'm Kelly Lubiato, publisher of Revista Policy. Today, we will interview the CEO of Swiss Re in Brazil, Fred Knapp. In previous episodes, we have already spoken with Leonardo Dale from On Global, Bruno Freire from Austral Re, and Rodrigo Protásio from Gallagher. You can access all of our episodes on your podcast player or on our YouTube channels. For those of you who are watching, subscribe and like our channel. You can also share it with your friends. Our program today is about the Latin America Market Report, which has just been published by Swiss Re. There is a lot of important information in this report, such as economic data, growth projections, in addition to specific information on the main countries in this region. Our guest, Fred Knapp, is an executive with 20 years of experience in the financial sector, in operations management, and in commercial areas. Prior to 2020, he served as CFO and COO for Swiss Re in Latin America, with responsibilities that included chairing the Regional Operations Committee, providing support in complex transactions, and interacting with local regulators on financial and other matters in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. During his professional career, Fred has led different teams in multinational insurance companies, overseeing the areas of underwriting, commercial, claims, accounting, tax, actuarial, and treasury. He joined Swiss Re in 2014 as CFO Reinsurance Brazil, and he was appointed head in Reinsurance Brazil and Southern Cone at Swiss Re in April 2020. I will make the same question that I do for all my guests. Talking about the Brazilian insurance market, what is particular for us?
There's a lot of things that are particular to us. I think the first one that we thought before there was we were not a cat country. But believe it or not, I mean we saw this in the last few years. We became a cat country. I think it's also the size of the country. I mean, when we see it as a continent compared to the rest of the region. So the size and the complexity of the country as well, I think it makes it unique to how we see the insurance industry, and also the ability for us to sell more and to really give the clients. I think it's some of the uniqueness that we have. The penetration of insurances is still low. So I think when we see the combination of what we are seeing right now in terms of the increase in terms of how the risks are taking place. So we just had a massive flooding that took place in the south of Brazil. But unfortunately, a lot of those losses were not insured. So I think that's one of the uniqueness that we see it. I mean, the level of penetration that we have in the insurance industry is still low, and I think it's one of the uniqueness that we see it in other countries of the region as well. But we believe that there is more that can be done to close this insurance gap that we currently have in place.
So we have a lot of space to grow in Brazil.
We're hoping for that, right? I mean, I think and not only just the growth, but also the education portion, which is extremely important for us as an executives of this industry. I think there is still room for us to really explain to the final customer why they are purchasing insurance policy. So I think there's a little bit more of that education. We need to do it as an industry. Obviously, the brokers, they have a big portion on this support that we need to give as an industry, the reinsurance and the insurance companies. I think there is a lot that we need to do to make sure that eventually the clients, they understand what they're buying.
A lot of work for all the market.
All the market. We have a lot to be accomplished in the upcoming years.
Yes. Now let's talk about the 2025 Latin America Market Report. What are the expected results in terms of insurance market growth in Latin America in 2024 and 2025?
So I mean, we are expecting, I mean, the real growth around 3.8%. I mean, that's, just looking at the figures here, in real terms in 2025. So that's the expected. I mean, we came from a 7.6% growth in 2024. I mean, this was driven mostly by rate changes and also what we call the hard market. I mean, so this is a phenomenon that is taking place across the globe, and we have seen this happening as the capital and also the interest rates and everything that is taking place at this stage. So this the hardening of the price might not be flowing through 2025. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a decrease probably on the level of growth that we saw in 2024, but this is still a growth, right? I mean, I think there's, as I mentioned in the previous comments here, like this penetration portion is still an item that we believe that there's more for us to do and close that protection gap.
Okay. What are the main problems that prevent Latin America from developing further in the insurance market?
I think the main one is income, right? I mean, when we see the final income, we're still a countries that do not eventually have the level of income that is required to just think about it, a insurance policy. I believe that once we move and there's a little bit more of economic growth as well, and that will allow for customers to start believing and understanding what's important for to be purchased in terms of insurance. So, but I think the main item is really how do we make sure that the economy is growing consistently. I think we, just for all the aspects, I mean, we did have a pandemic that
Yes.
we were in a trajectory of growth that took place, some of the income from all the population. And but also I believe there is this education portion, right? I mean, how do we make sure? But definitely I think that the income is the main aspect that we see it to not see the level of penetration that we probably have in other jurisdictions.
We have the same problem in Brazil and in Latin America.
Yeah, it's very similar, right? I mean, I think that this what we call the spare income, which eventually will give the ability for those to purchase more insurance. I think is still a process. We're hoping that the middle class eventually grows and they can think of products of protecting their families, their possessions, and which will allow them to eventually purchase more insurance.
Okay. Talking about the global economics problems, can we expect higher growth or more investments as the prime rates fall, for example?
Yes, I think that the question is, but most Latin America countries, I think we saw some of the changes that took place in terms of the interest rates and the interest rate environment, and there is a full connection on the economic growth and the interest rates. I mean, as the credit becomes more scarce, and we're seeing the opposite in Brazil at this stage, where there is a expectation of rate of the interest rate increase in the upcoming months. I mean, there's happening to allow the inflation to be under the threshold that the government is establishing. But we're hoping that once this fight of inflation it lowers, that we can see a bit more of economic growth in the upcoming years, right? But I think it is still this. We are the opposite of the rest of the world at this stage. We are increasing rate, whereas the rest of the world is decreasing rate. So I think it's going to be an interesting aspect in the upcoming years on how the development of the country, the growth, and also the penetration in insurance.
Which are the biggest risks for the Latin America developing market?
I mean, Latin America is a very diverse region, right?
Yes.
And there's several countries within that region. I think that diversity, and each one has their economic challenges in a way. I think the risks are all the tension that is taking place from a political standpoint, all the geopolitical that, in certain countries we have the right and the left. I mean, doesn't necessarily change, but there is tensions that are taking place, which can, especially in the insurance industry, we need predictability. And because of those changes in eventually in regulation, and this will also have an impact on how the potential growth that we see it. But the stability, as we alluded it before, is extremely important for the industry and also for the consumers to understand that they can purchase an insurance product or a car or house, but with all this tension right now, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see in the region, is to have that stability and also understanding what's to be expected in the upcoming years, which right now it's very challenging.
I see. In Brazil, we are seeing that a lot. So, how do you see the Brazilian insurance market? Is it driving growth in Latin America?
We saw growth in the upcoming in the last few years. I think the life was one of the drivers as well. I mean, we saw on the property side and also on the motor side. So there was a lot of growth that took place. We also alluded to this. I mean, there's still a whole bunch of items that are not penetrated. We did a bit of a math here, and we have about $150 billion dollars worth of items that are not currently insured, so what we call the protection gap, where currently there's a lot of uninsured. I mean, we saw this on the Rio Grande do Sul losses, where most of the economic losses that we did have in that region, and I always refer to the Rio Grande do Sul is almost two Floridas, right? Yes. I mean, and then we can put it in perspective, the size of the loss that we had. And the reality is only a few percentage points were actually insured, right? And we see that there is this penetration that is still not taking place, and we're hoping that this can eventually drive some of the growth that is expected for LATAM, which will allow us to be, from a insurance penetration standpoint, much closer to what we see in developed markets, which is in the double-digit area, right? Here, it's on the low digits, yes. Which, we see it as a region. There's still a lot room for improvement and room for growth, basically.
Okay. And are those risks the same for Brazil? And what's different in our country? We have already talked about this, but about penetration again, culture. But what do you see as a problem that we can resolve here and different of Latam?
I think the main item here is that we need to be aware that Brazil is a cat country. Okay. So I think we always, and I've been in the industry for over 20 years, when we always say, we have the rest of the region, which are cat countries. And we take Brazil and Argentina, probably we're not the only, but when we look at Mexico, there is hurricane exposure, there is earthquake exposure. Here we might not have the earthquake or the hurricane as I mentioned, but we do have flooding, we do have windstorms, so we have a whole bunch of other risks, and also the secondary perils that comes as part of that exposure as well. So once we understand that there is this exposure, and also the increase on the, when you get the coastal areas, there has been a lot of construction done that might not have had the standards to be constructed considering a windstorm event, for example. So I think it's very interesting, and we see that in other jurisdictions the building code is much different than what we see it here in Brazil, and I think we need to anticipate that the frequency as well as the severity should be increasing in the upcoming years. So we just saw this year in São Paulo. Here we had several very strong thunderstorms and rain that was extremely heavy, and we had 2 years ago also the exposure in terms of drought in the agro industry, which is about a quarter of our GDP. So when we see this on a different lenses, there is a lot of emerging risks that we need to consider. which are going to require some sort of protection from the insurance industry as a whole.
And how Swiss Re is prepared to bring some new products or new solutions for these problems here in Brazil? You have a lot of experience in cat risks.
So we are in continuous discussion with the market. I think it's also this dialogue with the industry, the dialogue with the clients as well, that they are exposed. We do have a few systems in place as well that we are using and discussing with the clients to assess the risk prior to assuming and say this is probably exposed, and you need to understand what are those exposures. But once I think it's just this continuous dialogue. I think it's extremely important that we, as an industry, we understand that the risks are there, that this severity and again the frequency is increasing, and we need to be prepared for the next 20-30 years, and what we as an industry we are going to do it to make sure that we're protecting those risks and working with the society as well, and that to anticipate some of those trends.
Talking about the future, for the next year, how are the perspectives for Latam growth and for the Brazilian market?
I think that the perspective is good. I think there is still not to the tune that we probably saw in the last year. Okay. So I think there's still, but when we look at the life programs, for example, there's a lot more interest. I mean, I think the clients understand why they are purchasing. I think it's one important item as well. We see it, but there is. When we see the GDP is also increasing, some not to the tune that we probably wanted it to, but there's still a lot of opportunities in how we will eventually connect this with the market.
And talking about the centenary of Swiss Re, what's the recipe for a longevity company?
We're extremely happy and proud. I mean, to be. I mean, we just completed our 100 years of our first policy or our first treaty written here out of Brazil. So we actually framed it and gave it to the client. So it was a very interesting to go back in so many years. I mean, we had to go by boat to basically sign those policies. So it was very, very interesting that we can see, I mean, Swiss Re completed 160 years, but we have 100 years of Brazil. So it's very good, and we are extremely proud of being celebrating in our centenary here in Brazil, and we're super committed. I think it's just creates and allows us to be extremely committed to the country. It goes back 100 years ago, and we're hoping that we are going to be here for the next 100 years. We're preparing the industry, but this dialogue is extremely important with the industry, and the reinsurer is here to be part of that process, and the insurance penetration that we also spoke about it today.
All of us, we are working for the same goal, to make the market grow. So we have hit the end of another Open Insurance TV program. I would like to thank Fred Knapp for participating in this episode. Thank you, Fred. And would you like to make some final considerations?
It's been a pleasure speaking, giving a bit of the perspective of LATAM. I think my final message here is we as an industry, we are here to also support economic growth of any country. So I think it's and the reinsurer has a very important position on also supporting the industry and the economic growth. So I think it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be part of this history. We're hoping that we can see it another 100 years and go back and say, hey, this is what we have done. So it's a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. For those of you who are watching us, I ask that you leave a like on our video and share it with your friends. If you have any suggestions for people or topics to be covered here, you can send your suggestions to the email address that appears here on the screen. See you on the next program. Bye.